Hey, Josh.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for letting me crash your office. And that's where we're at today. We're at Josh Beeler's office. Welcome to our Facebook Live. I am Becky Montoya-Wright, and we're going to talk some mental health. And I'm very glad that Josh Beeler was willing to participate. How you feeling?
I feel so good. I'm just telling myself I'm just having a chat with my friend Becky.
You are. You were just having a chat with me. We have Amber in the background, and she's going to try to follow us so that if there's any questions or things, she can let us know what she's seeing. But if not, then we'll just take a look at those when we're finished and we post and kind of go from there.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it'll be good. So I want to start off, Josh, by just introducing you and kind of tell us a little bit about the roles you have in the community, who you are, and the roles that you have in our community.
Well, I guess I would start with I'm a husband and father, and that's maybe the most important role for me. That I have two sons who grew up in the community, went to Shiloh High School, and then I also am an orthodontist. This is my office, Beeler Orthodontics. I've been here since 2006. Kids are my world, with a few adults mixed in, a few brave adults. But then I'm also an ecclesiastical leader for the area for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And that's another role that I play here locally as a spiritual leader.
About how many people are in that congregation?
So there's approximately 3,500 members of this church, and I have the responsibility over those members.
Wow. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you. I do appreciate you being willing. I don't know if you've been able to watch any of my previous little chats. We did one with Jensen, and we did one with Tenny.
Yeah.
I will say, interesting about Tenny, some of the comments where they couldn't hear her.
Okay.
What? Tenny's got a voice.
Nobody has ever not heard Tenny. That's amazing to me.
But I think she was kind of in a different element.
Yeah.
So don't let me overspeak you. If you gotta talk strong, talk strong.
You bet.
Okay. The reason that we're visiting is I was able to help Nexus Coalition get a grant from Blue Cross Blue Shield, and our grant project is called Not All Wounds Are Visible. Now, our shirts are actually flipping the message, and you can't read them this way, but the good news is my mother, Joyce Cox, she wanted to make sure when I do these visits that everyone can see the hotline information. And so the hotline information she has flipped on her computer and printed for me. So when Josh and I are looking at this, it's just a bunch of jumble. But when you all see it, it's going to tell you that the medical line is 911, and that's what we call if someone we think is in a medical crisis or is experiencing overdose. And then the mental health line is 988. And it's awesome that it's that simple, because for a long time that mental health crisis line was 10 digits and now it's only 3. So Blue Cross Blue Shield is providing some funding to help us push out some important messages about mental health, to push out those hotlines, and to start creating safe places in our community to heal and move forward in a county, Navajo County, where our numbers and our statistics are really grim in regards to the amount of people who are impacted by mental health struggles, suicide, and overdose. So that's why we're here today. We know that a lot of people aren't able to attend the trainings that we host. We host a lot of trainings, but we're rural, we're all spread out. And so our hope is we can use social media to make it more accessible. And so some of you might be watching right now, but hopefully others will get a minute to watch some of the things we talk about, share it, and get some good messages out there to Navajo County, and of course, anyone who lives anywhere. One thing I will be doing, I wanted to throw out there, is I will be doing another Facebook Live on October 3rd at 11 a.m., and it will just be me discussing a parenting topic. So I don't know that you necessarily want to mark your calendar. It'll be good. Don't get me wrong.
I will mark my calendar.
Good. But you can I keep them up so that people can access them later as well. And in October, Donna Faye Whitesinger is going to be my guest.
She's awesome.
She's a powerful leader in the community who has influence in so many demographics, and I'm excited to visit with her. I don't know her that well. We were at a training together, and I thought, this is someone I need to chat with someday.
She is. She's amazing, and I think you'll really find that to be a really far more interesting interview than with me. She's amazing.
The human stories that anyone have to offer are so fascinating. And I love learning people's stories, the things that they've had to face, and then their strategies for getting through them. It's powerful. It changes people to learn that idea of, rather than me just bringing my assumptions and my opinions to getting to know you, I want to know your lived experience and share vice versa, and that's how we really can make some connections.
Awesome.
Yes, so with that, Josh knew in advance that I was going to be asking him to share a challenge that he has faced, and we're going to kind of start with that, and then we'll go through some of the things that have got him through that challenge, and so that's kind of where we're at in this little visit.
Yeah, so I've been trying to think of something that would be meaningful there. I grew up in sort of a family that was unusual for the time. A family with I didn't know anybody else, any of my other friends that had divorce in their family, and so that was just different. It was different for me to be raised in that situation. Obviously, things have changed, and that's much more common now. But I found, so my 7th grade year, which as you know something about.
I do know a little bit about junior high.
Was a tough year because we actually moved 3 times into 3 different communities that year. And so at home things were challenging, but at school, going from, it seems like I got to see the full spectrum of the junior high world, being on top of the world as far as popularity and feeling so good, to actually being at the bottom, feeling completely lonely and bullied. And this is the 80s bullying, and there was definitely a lot of that. And so it was really tough for me to force myself to go to school every day. And so I'm very empathetic with things of that nature, with kids experiencing things that
kind of out of their control.
Absolutely.
Like moving 3 times wasn't something you were like signing up for. It was just something that was happening.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about those moves. Were you moving like within a community, or were you making big giant?
So we actually lived here in Show Low. We lived for a few years. We lived here in Show Low. I'd been raised in the valley. We moved here to Show Low. Things were great. My dad lost his job, and we moved over to Winslow. He was a truck driver. He was blue collar, very much. And so we moved to Winslow, sort of chasing work, and that was a tough thing. But I was amazed, like going from here to there, where maybe I didn't fit in, how well I was treated there. And then shortly after that, literally 3 months later, my dad lost his job there, and we moved to Utah. And
those are 3 giant demographic changes.
Totally different places. And so living in this new place that was very hard to break into was a real challenge. And it was the first time I had really experienced that sort of bullying. And
so Utah was actually the hardest of the 3.
Believe it or not, it was really hard, even for somebody like me, who belongs to the church that maybe a lot of people belong to, and that sort of thing. And so so that was an interesting time for me because I drew so close to my family. There were 2 things that happened there. I drew so close to my family because that's all I had, really. So they were a support, but also that's when I sort of came to know that I had nobody except for deity. I had nobody but God. And so it was a time that I really sort of started searching myself to find answers and to find this spiritual relationship. And I found it, and it changed my life. That things changed at that. So it was sort of this pivotal year where I kind of went from here to down to the bottom, and then sort of tried to lift myself up through those things.
Yeah, a couple of other kind of clarifying things to learn a little more about this time frame. So at this point, were you in a blended family already?
Yeah, and so I have so my mother and my twin brother and our stepdad, and then they had 2 children, a younger brother and a younger sister.
Okay.
So yeah, somewhat of a blended family. We had siblings who would come and go.
Okay, and would visit. So you'd already experienced the separation of your parents' marriage had already ended, and then you had already experienced, a new family unit. There's a lot. I mean, even though some of that can be really supportive, even in the most ideal circumstances, it's challenging to bring different people together and create these new family units.
For sure. So
you're piggybacking these 3 moves on top of a pretty loaded story as it was. Mm-hmm. That's a lot.
Yeah, it was. It was, especially for somebody who's 11, 12, 13, passing through these developmental road or mileposts, I guess you could say, with emotions all over the place. And so, interesting times for me. It wasn't the best of times, I'll just say that. Yeah.
And you found that having had that experience brings you like a different insight as you're working with young people.
I absolutely do. I think hindsight is great because I can look back and say, okay, now I empathize with a whole host of kids in particular, and adults too. Mm-hmm. I can see things maybe differently than sort of the homogenous world that a young white male might normally experience. So.
Well, your schooling in Winslow just took that opportunity and gave you all
it's totally different.
Yeah. It reminds me, I went to junior high in Taos, New Mexico, and I would guess the demographic, although different, different native population, the Native Americans in Taos are the Tewa, and I would guess most in Winslow are from the Navajo Nation.
Yeah.
What an enriching experience for me as a young person who had never really had cultural diversity to be plopped with a handful of white kids into a very culturally diverse Hispanic and Native American community. That has changed everything about who I am. Yeah. And moving to this community that also shares such rich diversity, so great.
Yeah.
It's interesting. We take in our college classes, we usually have to do like this multicultural class and multicultural sensitivity. And I've always found it interesting because I do have a fairly diverse group of friends. And I think, man, some of these friends would just crack up if they read the chapter that's supposed to explain their culture to me because they'd be like, put the book away and just come talk to me.
Right.
And that's where we really get to know what's going on with people. It's helpful to learn some general information, but for the most part, living those experiences, you can't replace that.
I agree.
That really says a lot about the energy you have in our community, in the different roles that you have with the young people here with your practice, in spiritual capacities, because you really do bring this energy of I'm a safe place, and I love that.
Yeah. So when I started my practice, which is orthodontics, again dealing with primarily young kids or teenage kids. The first thing that we established, my wife and I were the only employees at that time, and we said,
running the whole show.
Yeah, and we said this place is going to be about building confidence. And every time I sit down with a new hiree, somebody who's interviewing for the job, we emphasize, if nothing else, this may be the high point of these kids' days or weeks or even months being here in our office. They may not feel that way with with some of the things that we do, and we walk out a little sore. But we want them to feel.
You guys have such a fun energy.
Yeah, and we want that energy to be a real thing. We want there to be a real culture here of building and lifting, and that's. That's the little contribution that I can make. We want these kids to leave more confident, not just because they smile more. I mean, that's part of it, but we want them to feel lifted when they leave our door here.
Yeah, I think that energy is very apparent. I actually, if you looked closely, there are things in my mouth, including rubber bands, and it is a really positive environment. And I mean, you can say if this is true or not, but I think I might be like in the top 10 of patients ever. You're not going to say that. He's not going to do it. I am awarding myself that. I'm a good rubber band wearer.
Way to go. You are. I would say you are the top 3.
Top 3.
Yeah.
Keeping the rubber band.
Absolutely.
It's hard to get old teeth to move, and I figured rubber bands, man, I'll leave them in if it helps.
Becky is diligent and obedient and willing to pay the price.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
But it is a great office with really great energy, and that's a good thing. It's good for your employees to have an environment that feels that way. I would guess that just based on, because you guys also have a social media account, it looks like you guys are having a good time here.
We try to have fun. Again, it's all about the culture here, and we want if our slogan is "Live to Smile, Love Your Smile," we want people smiling here. And if you're not smiling here, working here, and you're not able to sort of bring that energy to the kids and adults who come here, sometimes apprehensive, sometimes with some deep issues.
Oh yeah.
With bullying and everything else that happens because of the world where I focus, then you don't belong here.
Yeah.
We really require and expect a high amount of being able to empathize and work with that population in particular.
I love that. Speaking of the fun office, I've loved a stack of shirts for them because they are such a great office, and I'm hoping they can help share our message. So we'll leave that
Absolutely
as well.
Look
And
forward
some
to
of these cool little bracelets. I know some people are watching this before Saturday, September 23rd. And so if you are at the parade, we will be handing out some shirts and some bracelets at that parade as well.
Cool.
It'll be good stuff. All right, so back into junior high, man. Junior high, and my full-time gig is the junior high counselor. So it's, even in the best of circumstances, junior high can be a rough go. So you've moved these 3 times. Do you end up staying in Utah for a while? Like you're there for the end of 7th grade? Does it roll into 8th grade?
Yeah, so it's so 8th grade. I don't know how I convinced my mom. She's kind.
Your mom
she was
is
thinking,
the best.
yeah, she really is, and she was that person that helped me through this better than anybody else, frankly. After a really rough year in 7th grade, she allowed my brother and I, who begged and pleaded, to go live with my grandpa in Idaho in a small farm community up there to kind of just get away from what we were experiencing, and that was amazing. It was we got to work on a farm and live in a community that was much more enjoyable for our experience there, and it changed everything. So then she only allowed us to stay that year. We had to move back for our 9th grade year.
Back to where they were in Utah. Okay.
Yeah, and that was a better year.
Good.
Things had sort of. I'm convinced that 7th grade is the worst thing ever. All kids should be able to sleep through that one.
There's a lot going on in the brain about that time. Well, there's not as much going on in the brain as we would like. Let me just say that.
That's true.
It's firing up. All kinds of things are happening. Yep. We're dumping a bunch of neurons and firing up a bunch of other ones. There's a whole lot happening. So we start to look like young adults, but our brain science isn't really supporting that we are young adults yet. So it just is a setup for some really challenging things.
Absolutely.
So your mom was wise to give you a year, and it sounds like you went to a fantastic community with a really great support system.
Yep. A town of about 200 people. There were literally 13 people in our class that year, and so that was just a
Two
big
of them were you
change.
and your brother.
Yeah, yeah. And then shortly after that, we moved to Gilbert. And I had grown up, I'd spent my early years in Gilbert, and so moved to a school that had my graduating class was around 1,000, and I loved it. It was awesome. Best, such great years.
That is so many different things to experience.
We moved a lot.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot in that process, and it was tough, but it was super building as well.
So you mentioned that your mom was your person.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say that she was doing? Like, are you able to even really qualify that, or do you just remember that's who it was?
Yeah.
Because when a young person has an adult they can trust, that is a huge resiliency factor. Like, that is something that contributes in a big way to a young person getting through hard things. And you identified your mom, your grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
Were you and your brother close? Was he
super close?
So he was probably part of that?
Yeah. So I was fortunate in that way that I have a twin brother. I don't know what the world is like for those that don't have a twin because I haven't lived that. But we've always been joined at the hip. And so, of course, he's the support, but he's also so integrally a part of who I am that it was always easier to have a friend between the two of us.
Yeah.
And so, but no, I remember one time when things were especially rough and I was ready to just quit a lot of things, just cash in and call it good and just, quit trying. And I told my mom this, and I still remember it was one of those changing points, these light bulb moments. She said, "Do not quit. You cannot quit." And it was just something that's so basic, but coming from somebody who was pretty unconditional in her love, I was like, I don't want to let you down. I'm not going to quit here. And so, so that was a big deal, and I've gone back to that every time I've wanted to back out of something over the years, and I don't want to disappoint her, not because there's any bit of judgment in that woman, but because there's unconditional love, and she's so supportive and always has been. She's been through a lot more than I ever will go through. So
that's beautiful. And I think that descriptor of unconditional love, as parents or adults that support young people, often in theory, we feel like we are unconditionally loving, that we're listening non-judgmentally, that we're doing all these things, or at least we have buy-in to those things. We know they're important. We know they matter. But it is hard.
Yeah.
It is hard to listen non-judgmentally because even if we aren't using words, our face will really give us away. I had a student one time who wanted to sit next to me when they told me something they had done. So they're like, "Can you come and sit next to me?" And my couch is it's a 2-seater, but it's not, I don't know. I didn't really want to go sit next to him. I'm like, "Can you just tell me what's going on?" And I said, "Let's go for a walk." So we walked side by side. And then as we were walking, they said, "Well, the reason I don't want you looking at me is because I know that even if your words are right, your face is going to drop when I tell you what I'm about to tell you." And there was so much wisdom for the young person to even request a side-by-side chat. Yeah. I'm like, that's good to know. And now in my role, I often will walk side by side rather than sit facing a young person, because they might be more inclined to share. That's why I think car rides are so great, because you don't usually have your rear view mirror fixed on your child's face. And so they don't feel, they don't necessarily have that feedback of your face. You're curious, like, "Oh, what did you just say?" face. Even if your heart is trying so hard to just be the safe place for them, sometimes our face fails us with a little bit of judgment.
It's true. It's true. And when I was in high school, my friends would come over to my house because they felt so comfortable in that place. My mom was one of those, and my dad too, my stepdad, at that point, people who I told everything to. And I did some stupid things in my life, and usually I'd come home and she'd be the first one that I would tell, and that's how safe I actually felt there.
That's so amazing.
And she was I don't know how she did it. I try to be that parent, but I'm not sure I always am.
Well, and sometimes we're willing to be that parent, and it doesn't mean that the young person is even though we're willing,
Right.
it doesn't always mean that we're going to get that completely transparent chat. So it's good to put that energy out there, but it's also good to have other adults that we trust in our kids' lives.
Absolutely.
And that's something that I really had to learn with my youngest too, because with my older 3, I was pretty controlling about that. And then with the younger 2, I just decided, hey, community.
Absolutely.
Takes a community. Where are you all? Let's raise
My
these
kids
two together.
can't have too many really positive adults in their life.
Yeah.
Truly. Yeah.
And sometimes that can feel threatening to us as parents, but boy, once we let that piece go, it's a beautiful thing to have the community involved.
Yeah.
And if our kids know that we trust them, to have these other connections, it's likely they're going to bring some of that stuff to us too, and we'll be able to offer our thoughts and support as well.
Yeah. As I look back at kind of these key people in my life that really sort of changed the trajectory, there are those amazing humans that were placed in the right place at the right time that turned me in the right direction. And I'm always thinking that if I'm frustrated or whatever with a kid or even with an adult, sometimes adults will come talk to me in my other role in the ecclesiastical side of life, and I always think, am I here to judge this person or am I here to help them? What can I do to steer them and help them the way some of these other people have helped me? And I try to tell them, look, nothing you tell me is going to change my love for you. And I can't say that unless I really mean that.
Yeah.
So.
And that is an energy that you were feeling from your mom. And it's not always an energy that young people have buy-in to, either in their family unit or with the adults at school. There are definitely young people and grown-up old people as well who feel like their support network has conditions on that love. And that's really tricky. That's where people will ask me, do you think such and such is a gateway drug, or this is a gateway to this or that and everything else? And my answer is, I really feel like what the gateway to really destructive choices is becoming good at lying. And whether you're smoking weed and becoming good at lying about that, or you're smoking, nicotine or whatever it is, if you feel like you have to lie and practice lying, that's where it starts to get tricky, and that's where I see behaviors start to escalate, because now I'm good. And I'm not saying that there aren't really significant things in research to support how some of those other things are risky, but when we can go home and just tell our mom everything, even if it was not good, then we're not building up this skill to become deceptive. And if we have this supportive place at home to kind of strategize and move forward on that, how amazing is that?
Yeah, I agree.
And when young people or as adults, when we do feel like we have to tell a lie or be a little bit deceptive, and then it stirs a lot of emotion, then we'll protect that lie, or we'll stand by it, and we'll just be like, well, now that you've made me defend this, I'm gonna put it on me as my full identifier. Like, this is who I am now. And so being able to have these conversations without strong emotion that would cause someone to have to be defensive is really helpful too. And so it sounds like your mom was bringing that home.
She was.
Good job.
She did.
Good job, Mom.
Yeah. She's probably watching right now.
I love that. If not,
She's
she'll
my
watch
biggest
it at
fan.
least once. I know, my mom too. That's why I have the
exactly.
little-
Way to go, Joyce.
I know. I think she's driving to the valley, so she may have to catch this
She'll catch it up
again.
later. Yeah.
She will, for sure. So we wanted to kind of address how resiliency and human connection had supported you. Can you think of other things that we've missed?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. One of the things that I don't know if it's a function of me being a twin or just me being a human, but I guess growing up, there was always this, everybody wants to tell you apart. Everybody wants to be able to figure out some way to tell you apart. So they're gonna look at whose teeth are straighter, or who is a better athlete, or who is more outgoing. And so there's, what I found early on is that there's this constant comparison. And comparison is such a thief of happiness, right? And we do this all the time. I do this even with myself when I go to an orthodontic convention or listen to somebody speak on spiritual matters. I think, oh man, I wish I was like them. I wish I was so much better. I wish I could do this. Those guys are so much better than I am. And so the older I get, the more I realize, man, that's such a destructive thing for us. On the other hand, I think it's so important to look, if I'm going to compare with anybody, it's with myself. Who was I yesterday? Who was I last week? Who was I a year ago? And I've learned that over the years that that's the only real person that I want to be a better version of myself.
Are you nice with yourself when you're having these conversations?
And so that's the next point that I thought about, that I often think about, because I didn't used to be, and I still struggle, and my wife knows this.
I know, because I saw she gave some facial expressions back there.
I can be my own worst critic, and that becomes such a destructive thing. And I see that with the humans that I work with as well, whether it's the kids here or the kids in church, or the people, the adults in church. That this comparison with themselves, they're so often so brutal to themselves. And I'm brutal to myself too, and I'm trying to be nicer. I'm trying to make a conscientious effort to just be kinder to myself in those comparisons. So it's okay to try to want to be better. I think that's been helpful for me, to be a better version of myself, but also to be super patient when we don't get there as fast as we want to.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because I think that we are kind of we want to compare where we're at to where we're headed, and those are really important things to do. And good point that we're often our worst critic. And I would say the majority of people are their worst critic. Yeah. The things we say to ourselves, we would rarely and possibly never say to somebody else. And so that's a kind of a good filter to put that through, is if we have a dialogue running in our head, we might think of who's somebody that I really hold in high regard, maybe even someone that I'm being a little bit delicate with. And would I ever, if they were experiencing this same shortcoming or even a huge failure, I mean, there are some big things that people we love go through, and sometimes it's at their own hands that they're dealing with it. Would we ever really, talk to them the way that we talk to ourselves?
Right. Usually
not. And so it's good to kind of refilter and consider, how would I say this to so-and-so, and give ourselves that grace. And we can trade, what I encourage people to do is trade the criticism and judgment that you're giving to yourself for compassion and curiosity. Compassion and curiosity, like if we make a mistake, or maybe we're an aggressive driver one time and we're like, I gave that up. I was done with aggressive driving. What was that about? Instead of just trash talking myself about it, I might just be like, hey, I'm kind of curious why I was being so aggressive today. What's that all about? And can I understand it better? And by being curious, I can get to the root of maybe what's really going on. And maybe what's really going on is I didn't have enough to eat for lunch, or I'm really tired, or too many events from the day got caught up with me and I was expressing them in my driving. And that awareness is what really helps us make big change, is that curiosity where we can then kind of explore the root of things.
Yeah, great point.
But give ourselves some grace in that too. That's hard.
Absolutely. It's taken me this long to sort of even start to approach that.
Yeah, it's great in theory. All of these things are great in theory. Talk to my kids and they'll be like, I can't believe she sits and talks about all this stuff like she's got it figured out. I don't have it figured out. I have it figured out in theory, right. But in practice, man, it is hard.
Yeah, truly.
Yeah.
Truly.
Well, I had a cussing problem for a while, and I'd like to say I don't at all, but I would tell my kids often, you are the reason I have to say these bad words, and completely put it on them. Not yelling, just telling them, as a matter of fact. Right. It is because of you all. And I have kind of stepped Being married to Doug has helped me because I know those words hurt him a little
Yeah.
more than they hurt other
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Although he's not judgmental either. He's very kind about it.
No, few people are as kind as he is.
He's very
truly.
kind.
Yep.
Working on that.
Yep.
So you mentioned your higher power, God, this faith in this amazing power source. You kind of got that early on, 7th grade. Man, I wish every 7th grader could tap into that power. And then you had these great adults in your life, a brother. And I would imagine that having a twin, your question of maybe it's a human thing. I do think as a human, we are kind of in comparison mode to some degree. I can't think that it would be any more powerful if you were a twin. Like I would think that would just be, because everywhere you go, everyone knows you. What's different between you and your brother? What are, how would I tell you apart? And they're always wanting to know.
Yeah.
So I think we might all experience it, but I would guess you've experienced it in a very magnified way your whole life, which has probably helped you be really careful to not have other people experience it that way.
Yeah. Man, I do not want, I think that too often we're just not kind with each other. I see it even in my office here all the time. If you can, the best way to shut people down is just to be kind. People come in angry, and you probably see it more at the school than I do here.
I don't know if I see it more, but parents, man, we love our kids.
Yeah.
We get nutty.
And exactly.
Which is what you guys are dealing with.
Yeah. And so we just hope that, if nothing else, I hope that I'm a kind person. If I'm not, I probably didn't eat well that day and sleep well that day too, like you say.
Yeah, those are usually my two things. Sleep and food kind of clear things up. So what about hobbies, passions, things that you found that really build that resiliency or are kind of your coping mechanism? Like, hey, I've got these things going on and one way I can just release is to do something. I know what the answer is.
You may know that. Organized sports was never my thing. It wasn't something that I felt super comfortable with. I did it for a few years, but then I went on this ski trip. The school took us on a ski trip that year in Idaho, by the way, and that changed my life. Truly, I mean, it sounds cheesy, but it changed my life. I'm not a great skier, but it was the first thing that I could do by myself, and
you're a pretty great skier.
I love to ski. And I want to do better. And I've skied with Becky, and she's an amazing skier. But I do love to ski. I love to be in nature. I love to be active and moving, and that's where I find some real solitude.
Yeah, if you get to visit the office, there's lots of ski decor. Maybe, I'm not sure if our frame is showing the ski stuff. There's some cool ski things throughout the office and probably in your house.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah, it's good times.
And I like that you mentioned that the organized sports, so you tried one thing, it was okay for certain reasons, but what a great asset to develop a sport that could be with you the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I do find that sometimes young people whose identity is so marked by team sports, and if they don't go on to play at the college level, which most don't, they can really struggle to know their place in the world for a little bit. And it can feel really like a bit of even a crisis to just be like, everything I did was around practices and games and all these things. So even if you are passionate about those things as a young person, maybe find something that you can start to develop into a healthy coping release, so that when that time and that era is done, you've got something else to kind of build.
When I have like a really stressful day or week or month, I found two things. I found if I can get out in nature, and I think you share this, and just move my body, it changes things. My brain starts working the right way again. I've also found that if I can figure out some way to be a little more creative in life and actually create something. And
do share.
Yeah.
What are you
so for me,
creating?
simply creating this office and this and this world of this culture of what we call Beeler orthodontics, and I get this great opportunity. It's probably why I arrived at the job that I arrived in, there's as much art to it as there is science, and I love both of them. I love learning, but I also love creating, and at least for now, I get to create beautiful smiles.
Love it. And you do. That's a great answer and a great field for you to be in.
Yeah.
Being outside is really great, and something you said about how it clears your mind, clears your brain, and there's brain research that supports that anytime we're doing a coordinated activity, even walking on a trail, we're doing right-left coordinating, which fires up the right and left hemisphere of the brain. So anything we're thinking about, like say we kind of bring our troubles to the trail, or we're just kind of pondering as we're on our hike, we're actually firing up those thoughts, and there's a lot that goes into like the feeling center of the brain, the limbic system, the amygdala. Hippocampus has all these things kind of wired for how we might respond to some of these fear-based things. So if we're thinking about them and we're in this safe place out in nature and we're firing up the brain with the right-left coordination, we're giving new neural pathways to our brain, and we're actually being able to cope. So it's not just like some magical thing that happens out here. It's really happening in our brains. We are being able to create new neural connections to help us deal with maybe some of the hard things we've had brought to our awareness. Your role as an ecclesiastical leader, you get to be kind of the sponge for a lot of heavy things people bring to you. It's not much different than what I do as a therapist, other than you're kind of coming at it with a particular energy, maybe a little bit different than mine. But we basically are inviting people. Have you had very many people make an appointment to just sit with you and tell you how great things are?
I wish.
Yeah.
I wish.
I mean, every now and then we get to have a chat with someone, and it turns out that might be the case. But the bulk of the time, we're sitting with people who have a lot to unload. And so it's important for people who are, whether they're in your role or professional role like I'm in, or just that person, because sometimes in our lives we have those people that we turn to, that we basically say, here, will you hold the emotional barf bucket while I puke all my blah into it? And those are wonderful people to have in our lives, but they need to have strategies. It's called compassion fatigue. There's so many things that can happen to the person that's constantly being unloaded on. And being outside, being on a trail, skiing, pickleball. Do you do that?
We have done that a little bit. I hope to do it a little more someday. My wife is dying for me to do it more with.
I have not done it, but that's again, that right-left coordination.
Yeah.
Like there's just so many things about that would, from a scientific standpoint, be very supportive of mental wellness.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
It's pretty cool.
Totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So I wanted to get your thoughts on our community wellness, and then also how you feel as a community we can create those spaces of support just generally. So any thoughts on how, kind of what's going on from your vibe on the community wellness?
Yeah, I worry a lot about the young people. I think that we have young people who are resilient. I think we have young people who portray resiliency, and I think we have young people that are just really struggling. I see that here. You know, I took your class a year or so ago. I don't even remember when that was.
Yeah, it was the mental health first aid, and it would have been before the pandemic.
Wow.
Yeah,
that was
so
a long time ago.
It would have either been in 18 or 19, yeah.
Because I wanted to understand more. I wanted to learn what I could do, because sometimes, especially with kids, I do feel inadequate in kind of the resources that I have and how I can help them and turn them. I think I can be a kind voice and a supportive voice, but sometimes they need more. And so I think what I still sometimes struggle to understand is where we can sort of direct some of these kids as we start to see warning signs and signs of concern. So I'd love maybe for you to even expound a little bit on your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's been really challenging, especially in a small rural community, because our mental health professionals to young people and grown-ups needing mental health supports, the ratio is really, I think it's about for every 1,000 people seeking mental health supports, there's one therapist. And clearly that's not going to be a practice that can sustain itself. And so the good news to this is the virtual 2020 did a lot of things, and we can get, I don't know, we want to get into that very much at all, but one thing it did do, if there were silver linings, the virtual practices and being able to make appointments with counselors and therapists, and young people particularly, they're digital natives, they're very comfortable on their devices, and there's platforms that allow them to create a profile with their parents' oversight, and they can look and preview all the different therapists based on what they've put together in their profile of what they need, and they can get an appointment within 48 hours.
Cool.
It's not somebody local, they're not sitting together, and that may have some drawbacks, but there's also some real pros. They can really work around scheduling. They don't have to necessarily get pulled from school or sports because these options allow really unique time frames to make that work. And there's even outpatient intensive programs that will offer pretty intensive therapy for like a 6-week period where you're getting online virtually and you're participating in individual work and group work for 9 to 11 hours a week. And one of those that we're working with right now is called Charlie Help. And most young people in our community, whether they're on access insurance or have private insurance, they would have coverage with their program.
Cool.
And so that could be an alternative to, say, if a family is working with someone who maybe has, they're concerned has an eating disorder or some neurodivergency, like where they're really struggling to have connections, social connections with people their age, suicidality, like they have very unique programs that can be tailored to each young person, and they do a really great intake. So I would say that's our biggest thing that's kind of coming through to our community right now are the virtual options. But there are, each of the schools up here are working different programs to try to educate young people. The awareness of the hotlines, just knowing that they're out there. Overdose is such a problem, and drugs are so accessible to young people right now. Helping them understand that if they're concerned that their friend might have overdosed, the gut instinct and what the teenage brain is telling a young person is don't get your friend in trouble, don't get them in trouble, don't get them in trouble. And so they might hesitate to make that call. And what we want to push out is there are good Samaritan laws in the state of Arizona. So if you call because you think your friend has overdosed, you're not going to get in trouble, and your friend might have their life saved. So it's a law to kind of encourage people. If you think someone has overdosed, call 911. Nexus Coalition will come and talk to any group about the dangers of the different drugs that are in our community right now. And they can also do naloxone trainings where they will teach you how to offer a life-saving drug if someone has overdosed from an opioid, which would include a lot of the pain medications and the one that we hear so much about right now, which is the fentanyl. So there are, in all of these resources, well, like the Charlie Help in getting therapy, those may have some costs tied to them. But everything that I'm doing and that Nexus Coalition is doing is free. Like we're just offering as much information as we can for free because we were able to get that grant.
Awesome.
Yeah. So there's a lot of really good information in that regard. Do you feel like it's tricky in a conservative Christian faith to put judgment in the right space and be a safe place for people? Or do you feel like our community is starting to figure out how to do that?
Yeah, good question. I think that that can be an issue. I hope that there's, I hope we're trying to look beyond some of the divisive ways that have become a part of who we are in certainly in the United States. That stuff really doesn't have any place in my world. I hope we can just look at humans the way that the Savior Jesus Christ would, at least the way I understand him, and learn as I study his life. So, but I think it can be tricky, and I think perception is another piece of that. You know, again, sometimes the perception of this judgmental nature, whether or not it's real, there is a perceived.
Yes. I agree with you. I think sometimes we become so concerned that we're being judged that we almost become judgmental of the people that we think that are judging us.
Absolutely.
And it can really be this tricky space to navigate. Yep. I have worked with young people who have felt that their parents would deal better with their death than with knowing the parts of themselves that they're struggling with. And almost always when we have an opportunity to work together with their parents, it's just not the case. The parents may not be prepared to learn the challenge that that young person is facing or where they're at with things, because sometimes it might include that they are taking a step back from the faith or conducting their lives in a way that's going to be different than the parents anticipated. But I do find that the parents that I've been able to bring into that conversation, they do want, it might not be their gut reaction, but they do want to meet that young person where they're at. And it might take a little bit of work. You mentioned coming to my training. A lot of times after I do one of those trainings where we just talk about how are we handling these difficult conversations, people will really feel this heaviness of, oh my gosh, I have failed so many times. Like they just think, I didn't say the right thing in this instance, and I didn't do the right thing here or the right thing there. And none of us do. We're just having a human experience. Right. We bring the best we can. We bring what we know when we know it. But when we know new things, then we can bring new things.
Absolutely. You know, I've found the same thing. Parents are generally not nearly as scary as kids think they are. And when I can't think of a single time where I've brought parents into a situation where the kid may have thought, wow, they're going to disown me, they're going to think the worst of me. I can't think of a single time where that has happened, where I've brought the parents in and it's been anything but supportive.
Yeah.
Challenging, but supportive.
And there might be some wisdom that the young person came to you or to another adult first to help bridge that gap. Yeah. Because that might actually help the parent recognize, wow, they actually wanted the support of somebody else in this. And that might actually bring them into a headspace where they're able to go, okay, this is pretty serious. Yeah. Or they're really my child, this young person, is really attempting to involve me in something it's hard for them. And that helps us want to honor whatever experience they're having.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm glad that they can do that. And I'm glad you're having those opportunities. I've had a few as well where I'm meeting with the young person and we've invited the parents into the conversation, or I'm meeting with a spouse and we've invited the spouse into the conversation, or whatever the story might be. Those are some doozies. Yeah. But it usually is impressive what we're able, the resiliency we're able to have to
the response.
Yeah. And I do think it's nice to give people that opportunity.
Truly.
It's
I actually think it's super healing in the process.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, I feel like we've covered some great ground. You've done well. So I am one of Josh's patients, and I actually do have quite a bit of anxiety tied to dental work in general. I know that orthodontistry is its own brand of things. So I put off, my little story is because of my fear of having some things worked on in my own mouth. I put off work on my teeth for a very long time. And so it's been a very brave experience to go through this process. And as I pulled into the driveway today, I thought, there's some irony that I'm going in to present Josh with something that he will feel uncomfortable doing, because I get to usually come in with a little bit of nerves. Right. I was very calm coming in today. I was rearranging furniture, setting up lights. I'm like, I can do this. And you've been great to visit with.
Thanks. By nature, I am a very shy person, always have been. But things like this have caused me to stretch outside my comfort zone. And I usually am better off for it.
Yeah, and I think the community will be too. I know a lot of people are very interested in little bits of your story. And there might be young people whose families are recently, or they've been, in a blended family, divorced, single moms, that element alone is something that they might now be able to listen when you're offering anything to them. They're going to have a new lens. They're going to have had an opportunity to connect with you through your lived experience. And that's a beautiful thing. And it's a brave thing to share. And I appreciate that you were willing to share that. Let me see if I have any other notes on here. You've asked a few questions. Did you have any other questions that you wanted to address?
I've learned some things. I actually didn't. I feel bad that I'm a healthcare provider and I didn't know about the 988 thing, and I'm excited to know that. I didn't know that. And so
yeah, that's only been
here.
About a year. So that changed a year ago in August, and I was so excited to hear about it.
Yeah.
Because how hard is that to remember?
Super easy.
Yeah.
I can use that, and I will use that. I have no doubt.
And so the way that number works is you call 988 and it's going to put you to a national hotline. And then the national hotline is going to direct you little to more local, state-run resources. And so just depending on how in demand, I'm not going to lie, sometimes that number is in strong demand. I've had people call or text that number and have a little bit of wait time before they're getting immediate support. But they do kind of offer some things in the wait time to at least kind of help be more calming. Ultimately, what they're going to do is get you in touch with the Navajo County crisis units and Apache counties. And then there's even a possibility that there might be a mobile crisis unit that could come to you. Not 911, but somebody who would come just for an a mental health crisis. Yes. If they are concerned that there's a medical issue at all, then they're going to have you with 911 so that you can have the medical supports that are needed. And sometimes that is the best resource as well. So that's kind of how those numbers work. They both have very important resources and outreaches, but just depending. And of course, if you are suspicious of overdose at all, just call 911. Yeah. That's going to be the number you want to call. So yeah, we talked about the 988 and the 911. The name of our grant, the project is Not All Wounds Are Visible. What do you think of that name? Like, does that ring true?
Truly, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
Do we sometimes show up trying to put on that we've got it all together when inside, man, we're dealing with some stuff?
I think most of the time we do,
Yeah. So it's nice to have those people we can be more transparent with. And then just a couple of other things. Like I said, on the 3rd of October, I'll be doing a parenting topic at approximately 11 a.m. Coming to you live from the junior high library. That's where that'll be. And I'm excited to work out the details with Donna Faye Whitesinger to have a chat similar to this one in October. That's kind of where we're at. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Yes.
For all you do.
Oh, thank you, same. And thanks, Amber. Do a little wave to Amber. She got to sit through all this.
There's the true powerhouse and support in my life right there.
That's amazing. You guys have a great thing. All right, I have to walk up to the camera to stop it. Sorry, everyone, but we'll figure this out. Every time it takes me a minute. Oh, it's the thing.